Today is April 7th, 2018, and welcome to Minuteman News. I'm your host, Austin Gerrett. On tonight's show, we were scheduled to talk about the UN Solar Energy Report, the most recent U.S. sanctions on China and Russia, the school strikes, and some more. However, due to time constraints, those videos have been postponed until Monday. Nevertheless, we still have time for a little second-hand news. The clock starts now.
The court sentences the defendant Park Geun-hye to 24 years in prison and fines her $16.8 million.
It's a trend that many parents are not even aware of. But e-cigarette use, or vaping, has grown an astonishing 900% among high school students in recent years, according to the Surgeon General.
It's going to get bigger. There's going to be more fertilizer washing down into surrounding waterways, more manure washing off into surrounding waterways.
Reservoirs, which depend solely on rainwater, are dangerously low, bone dry in places, and they are Cape Town's only source of water.
The FDA is now considering the use of e-cigarettes and vaporizers an epidemic amongst high schoolers. According to recent reports, this nicotine delivery system has seen a 900% increase in usage from 2011 to 2015, and in 2016, an alarming 1.7 million high school students and 500,000 middle school students had self-reported usage of e-cigs. There are many who consider this system of delivery to be a gateway to future tobacco use, whose nicotine contents have been deemed by the NIH a potential gateway drug to cocaine. The most alarming factor is the amounts of metals like lead, nickel, zinc, and chromium that are contained within the aerosol, that are flavored to match the reality of vaporized chemicals. Critics of these reports claim that the vast majority of users are adults, but that fails to account for their proponents' point that even one teen is too many. Former South Korean President Park Geun-hye was convicted of 16 of the 18 charges levied against her, most of which involved abuse of power and coerced bribery. According to the Korea Times, Park was sentenced 24 years in prison and fined 18 billion won, which translates to 12 million pounds or $17 million US. South Korea's first female president, Park Geun-hye, was the first elected head of state to be removed from power following her impeachment in December of 2016 and the formal removal in March of 2017. The former leader was not in court, opting instead to boycott her hearings and vowing to appeal whatever sentence is passed down. Global climate change seems to be a major contributor to recent droughts in East Africa, according to iNews. Despite these areas being prone to drought, the length and severity appear to be caused by a lack of seasonal rainfalls, attributed partly to climate change. The same appears to be the problem in Cape Town, South Africa, who, despite recent successes in delaying Day Zero, are still struggling to feed and provide water for their growing population. Day Zero, of course, being the day that officials take over full control of water supplies. Meanwhile, the Sahara continues to grow, as droughts plaguing much of Africa assist in pushing the world's largest desert to between 10% and 18% larger than it was in 1920. Recent research seems to indicate that a combination of anthropogenic, or man-made, influences and natural climate cycles, namely the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, are likely causes. The Gulf of Mexico has experienced a massive dead zone the size of New Jersey. Al Jazeera breaks down the situation. Take a look.
In Iowa, cornfields and soy dominate the landscape and the economy. This is the breadbasket of the Midwest, where 90% of the land is devoted to agriculture. But for years, harmful nutrients have been running from farms into waterways and eventually into the Gulf of Mexico. The resulting dead zone in one of the world's most fertile fishing areas threatens livelihoods and a multi-billion-dollar industry. Some environmental groups say the meat industry and its voracious appetite for animal feed is to blame.
It's going to get bigger. There's going to be more fertilizer washing down into surrounding waterways, more manure washing off into surrounding waterways. With demand for meat rising and water pollution worsening, these stakes really could not be higher, and there absolutely has to be a switch.
This is a filter strip. It's the area between the cornfield and the creek.
Mark Peterson is one of a new generation of farmers determined to change things. Using planting techniques that retain soil and prevent harmful runoff is something he hopes will reduce pollution.
I consider myself a self-proclaimed shrimp hugger in the fact that if I keep my nutrients and my soil on my farm and they don't go down to the Gulf of Mexico, it will allow for a better shrimp habitat.
Billions have been spent tackling the problem, and some in big agriculture are making changes. But nitrogen levels in the Mississippi River haven't declined since the 1980s.
Agricultural practices are then changing in states like Iowa, albeit slowly, but environmentalists continue to lay much of the blame on the doorstep of big meat companies. Others here, though, say there are larger issues at stake.
Even as the agriculture and fishing industry faces serious challenges, global warming may be an even bigger issue.
food production, I think, is imperiled by climate change. We're already seeing declines in wheat production in China from soil loss due to climate change. You can't grow corn in western Kansas anymore, even with irrigation. And there's some question about how much corn we'll be able to grow in Iowa in 50 years.
Farmers in the Midwest are now being encouraged to reduce runoff, but with corn and soy prices falling and demand for land to feed livestock growing, voluntary action may not be enough. Andy Gallagher, Al Jazeera, Stanton, Iowa.
I chose to show this video in full because I feel that it breaks down the main issue decently, yet rather quickly, allowing me to add some input. Firstly, this video is a few months old now, but I have a Business Insider article that is more recent and says roughly the same thing. Secondly, it demonstrates a rather dangerous problem with modern media, in that it gives too little time to major problems such as this, resulting in a lesser intellectually stimulating conversation. The point about climate change seen from left field without any solutions or how it impacts the situation, instead choosing to prattle on about product yield and how bad the meat industries pollute the waterways. While an overall useful point, it fails to address the root of the problem indicated in the story, opting for a blame game that will likely do more to harm Middle America and its farmers through regulations and restrictions, which of course likely won't even be enforced properly, than it will actually do to help reduce pollution. Mark Peterson, the self-proclaimed shrimp hugger, was on the right track with his solution to runoff, and spending more time looking at his blueprints instead of demonizing the meat industry likely would have paid off. Should you wish to tackle big meat, you'd have to first demonstrate why it hurts little agriculture to the American public. People aren't going to stop eating cows because they fart and poop too much. They will, however, if they see how dangerous that is to the producers of cow feed. Next week I'll be doing a full video regarding this topic. That's all for today's secondhand news segment. This has been Austin Gerrett with Minuteman News, and I'll see you all next week.